My name is Ivy Colton. I'm 29. If you had done something with your life, I wouldn't have to explain you to people. My mother said that to my face, at Thanksgiving dinner, in front of 31 relatives. She'd been saying versions of it for 7 years. The dropout, the disgrace, the daughter who wasn't worth a toast. What she didn't know, what nobody at that table knew, was that the daughter she'd spent 7 years erasing had built something in the silence they gave her. And that night, the truth walked into the room without knocking. But this story starts long before that table. It starts with a phone call at 2 a.m., and a choice that cost me everything. Before I go on, like and subscribe, but only if this story speaks to you. Now let me take you back to March 2017, the night my life split in two. I was a junior at UConn. Computer science, GPA, 3.7. Not the brightest in my class, but I showed up every day. I studied until my eyes burned. I wanted that degree more than most people understood. My phone rang at 2:04 a.m. on a Tuesday in March. It wasn't Mom. It wasn't Dad. It was Mrs. Tierney, my grandmother's next-door neighbor in Bridgeport. "Ivy, honey, it's Ruth." She collapsed in the kitchen. The ambulance just left. I sat up in bed. My roommate stirred. I was already pulling on shoes. I called my mother first. It rang 5 times. "What, Ivy? It's 2 in the morning." "Grandma had a stroke, Mom. She's at St. Vincent's." Silence. Then a sigh. Not the kind that comes from fear, the kind that comes from inconvenience. "She's old, Ivy. That's what happens. I have a deposition to prep in the morning. Call your sister." She hung up. No questions. No, "Is she okay?" Just a click, and gone. I called Meredith. She picked up faster. "Ivy, I can't. I have bar prep. You know Mom will lose it if I fall behind." "Mare, it's Grandma." "I know, but what am I supposed to do from here?" I drove 4 hours in the dark, alone. No coffee, no playlist, no company. Just the highway and the sound of my own breathing. When I got to St. Vincent's, Grandma Ruth was in the ICU, tubes in her arms, a mask over her face. The left side of her body? Still. The woman who taught me to ride a bike, who braided my hair every Sunday from age 8 to 14 while my parents sorted out their separation. She looked like a stranger in that bed. She opened her eyes, reached for my hand, squeezed once. She said something through the oxygen mask. One sentence. Quiet, just for me. I'll tell you what she said later. It matters. But right then, standing in that fluorescent room, I understood something with perfect clarity. No one else was coming. Grandma Ruth needed 6 to 12 months of full-time rehabilitation. Physical therapy 3 times a week. Someone to help her eat, bathe, move from the bed to the chair. The hospital social worker handed me a pamphlet for home care aides. I looked at the rates and almost laughed. $42 an hour. Ruth's Social Security check barely covered rent and medication. I went to my academic advisor the following Monday. Professor Donnelly, a good man, wire-rimmed glasses, coffee stain on his sleeve every single day. "Take a leave of absence," he said. "You've earned it. Come back when you can." He signed the paperwork. I signed the paperwork. I packed my dorm room into 4 boxes and drove back to Bridgeport. Then I called my mother. "I'm taking a leave. I need to be with Grandma full-time." The line went quiet. Not shocked quiet. Calculating quiet. "Don't tell anyone in the family," she said. "What?" "I don't want them thinking we can't handle our own problems. You know how they talk." "But it's the truth, Mom." Her voice dropped. Flat. Final. "The truth is, you're quitting. That's all they need to know." I stood in Grandma Ruth's kitchen, phone pressed to my ear, watching Ruth through the doorway. She was asleep in the hospital bed we'd rented for the living room, her left hand curled against the blanket like a fallen leaf. I wanted to fight. I wanted to say, "I'm not quitting, I'm choosing. There's a difference and you know it." But Ruth had just come home. She needed calm. She needed me present, not on the phone screaming at a woman who had already decided what the story would be. So I said nothing. And my mother began writing the first draft of a lie she would tell for the next 7 years. The 4th of July barbecue was at Aunt Linda's house in Glastonbury. 20-some people, burgers, citronella candles, Kids running through the sprinkler? I almost didn't go. But Grandma Ruth asked me to push her wheelchair out onto the patio, and I couldn't say no to a woman who'd spent 3 months relearning how to hold a fork. We arrived 40 minutes late. I'd been doing Ruth's afternoon stretches, the ones the physical therapist showed me, the ones that made Ruth grip the armrest and whisper curses she thought I couldn't hear. When I pushed her through the back gate, I felt it immediately. The air shifted. People looked at me too long, then looked away too fast. Aunt Linda came over first. She put her hand on my arm. "Honey, are you okay? Your mom told us." I glanced across the yard. My mother stood by the drink table, dabbing her eyes with a napkin, surrounded by 3 of my aunts. She looked up, caught my gaze, looked back down at her plate. "That's not exactly what happened," I said. "Grandma needed—" "Ivy, please." My mother's voice carried across the patio, soft, trembling. "Not here. Not today." Every head turned, not toward her, toward me. Like I was the one causing a scene. Like I was the one making a grieving mother cry at a family barbecue. I closed my mouth. Grandma Ruth reached up from her wheelchair and squeezed my wrist. She didn't say a word. She didn't need to. I spent the rest of the afternoon in the corner of the yard with a paper plate I never touched, watching my mother receive hugs from people who thought she was brave. On the drive home, my phone buzzed. A text from Meredith. "Mom's really upset. Why do you always have to make everything about yourself?" I pulled over, read it twice. Then I put the phone in the glove compartment and drove my grandmother home in silence. 6 months later, Ruth was stronger. Still in the wheelchair, but she could transfer to the couch by herself, make her own tea, argue with the television. She was coming back, and I was building something too. Quietly, at 2 in the morning, after Ruth fell asleep. Online courses, Python, JavaScript, data architecture. I didn't have a degree, but I had time, discipline, and a kitchen table that doubled as a desk. Then I caught a break. A small software company in Hartford, Ridgeline Tech, posted an internship that didn't require a bachelor's. I applied. I got a callback. I interviewed. The hiring manager, a woman named Paula, smiled and said, "You're exactly the kind of self-starter we need." I got the offer letter on a Thursday. I started the following Monday, or I was supposed to. Friday afternoon, my phone rang. Paula's voice was different. "Miss Colton, I'm sorry. We've received some concerning information. We're going to have to rescind the offer." My chest went cold. "What information?" "A family member called, expressed concerns about your reliability. I'm sorry. It's policy. We can't move forward." I knew before she finished the sentence. I knew who called. I drove to my mother's house that evening. She was watering the rosemary on the front porch. "Did you call my internship?" She didn't flinch. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Someone from my family called HR and told them I wasn't reliable." She set down the watering can, looked at me the way you'd look at a child who keeps asking for candy after you've said no. "Maybe they just didn't want you. Did you think about that? Not everyone is going to hand you things, Ivy." She went inside. The screen door closed behind her. I stood on that porch for a long time. Back at Ruth's house that night, I sat at the kitchen table and stared at nothing. Ruth wheeled in from the living room. She watched me for a while, longer than usual. I thought she was just tired. I didn't know it then. But someone in that house had already started collecting the truth. I just wouldn't find out for years. Let me tell you what rock bottom looks like when no one is watching. I was 24. I lived in a studio apartment in Bridgeport. $650 a month, radiator that clanked all night, a window that faced a brick wall. I freelanced web projects for small businesses, a bakery in Milford, a landscaping company in Shelton, a dentist's office that needed an online booking form. $15 an hour, sometimes $20 if the client didn't haggle. Ruth's Social Security covered her rent, but not her medication. The blood thinners alone were $380 a month after the Medicare gap. I covered the difference every month. Without asking anyone? Without anyone asking me? My savings account had $1,140 in it. That number went down every month, never up. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was Thanksgiving. Every year I went. Because Ruth wanted to see the family. Because she loved her granddaughters, both of us, even if the room only loved one back. And every year, my mother delivered the same performance. The sad sigh when someone asked about me. The proud glow when someone mentioned Meredith. The way she'd pat my hand across the table and say, "We're just glad you're here, honey," like I was a rescue dog she was fostering out of charity. And the relatives? They weren't cruel. They were just misinformed. They believed the first story they heard because the first storyteller cried the hardest. If I stayed silent, I knew exactly what would happen. I'd go broke within 6 months. I'd lose the ability to pay for Ruth's medication. And I'd spend the rest of my life as a cautionary tale my mother told at dinner parties. The daughter who almost was. One night, I sat in front of my laptop. A side project I'd been building for months. A logistics management tool for small freight companies. I'd been testing it with a trucking company in New Haven. The owner said it saved him 11 hours a week. I looked at it, really looked at it. It was good. It was genuinely, undeniably good. And something in me shifted. I made a decision in January 2019. No announcement, no manifesto. Just a choice made at a kitchen table at 1 a.m. with the radiator clanking and a cup of cold coffee next to my laptop. I was going to build this thing, for real. I filed the LLC paperwork the next week. I chose the name Juniper Labs. Juniper was Ruth's middle name, and I registered under Parker, her maiden name. Ivy Parker, CEO of Juniper Labs. On paper, no connection to Ivy Colton, the family disappointment. I didn't do this to hide. I did it to survive. The last time I'd been visible, the internship, someone made one phone call and took it away. I wasn't going to give anyone that chance again, not my mother, not anyone. Ruth knew, she was the only one. I told her over breakfast one morning, scrambled eggs, wheat toast, her blood pressure pill next to the orange juice. "I'm starting a company, Grandma, a real one." She looked at me over her glasses. "About time. I can't tell anyone. Not Mom, not Meredith, not even Uncle Rob." "Good. It might not work." She set down her fork. "And it might. So stop talking and go build it." 2 weeks later, she called me into her bedroom. She handed me a check. $3,200. I stared at it. "Grandma, this is everything you have." "I know what it is. I can't take this." She took my hand. Her grip was weaker on the left side, but it was still firm enough to mean business. "I didn't raise you to be small, Ivy. Take the money, buy whatever computers need buying, and don't you dare pay me back." I bought a server. I built the first production version of Juniper's platform in Ruth's spare bedroom, sitting on a folding chair, working 16 hours a day. No one clapped, no one noticed. That was the point. Let me move fast here, because 3 years of building looks a lot less glamorous than people think. Year 1. I had 3 clients, all small freight companies in Connecticut and Western Massachusetts. I drove to each one personally, installed the software on their office computers, trained their dispatchers. Revenue, $48,000. Enough to keep the lights on, keep Ruth's prescriptions filled, and reinvest every leftover dollar back into the platform. Year 2. Word spread, not through marketing, but through truck drivers talking to truck drivers at rest stops and loading docks. 17 clients. I hired my first employee, a developer named Marcus, who worked remotely from Philadelphia. Revenue, $310,000. I moved out of the studio and into a 1-bedroom. Ruth got a new wheelchair, the kind with actual cushioning. Year 3. 82 clients across 14 states, 6 employees, all remote. Revenue, $2.1 million. A venture capital fund in Boston called and asked if I was raising a round. I said not yet. They said they'd wait. And through all 3 of those years, I kept going to Thanksgiving, because Ruth asked me to, because she loved those gatherings even when they didn't love me back. And every single time, the ritual played out the same way. "Still no degree?" my mother would say to whoever was listening. "Meredith just made junior partner. We're so proud." At Thanksgiving year 3, Aunt Linda's daughter-in-law asked me directly, "So what do you do exactly, Ivy?" Before I could open my mouth, my mother answered for me. "She does some computer thing, freelance, I think." She didn't look at me when she said it. She never did. Ruth caught my eye from across the table, and gave me the smallest nod, the kind only I could read. Not yet. Then year 4 happened, and everything accelerated. A phone call from San Francisco, a number that made me sit down on the floor of my apartment. But that, I'll get to in a moment. Okay, let me pause here for a moment. Ivy just got a call that could change everything. But before I continue, I have to ask you something. If you were Ivy and you'd been silenced for years, would you tell your family the truth now? Or would you keep building in silence? Drop your answer in the comments. A for tell, B for stay silent. Now, let's keep going. Thanksgiving, year 5, the year Meredith brought Craig home. Craig Whitfield. Tall, polite, firm handshake. His family owned a commercial real estate firm in Fairfield County. His grandmother, Mrs. Henderson, came too. Silver hair, pearl earrings, the kind of posture that said she'd never slouched a day in her life. 30 people at the table. Diane had outdone herself. New tablecloth, actual cloth napkins, a centerpiece she'd probably pinned on Pinterest 3 months in advance. Craig sat beside Meredith. I sat across from them, next to Ruth. It happened during the salad course. So, Ivy, Craig said, smiling, where'd you go to school? A simple question. Polite. The kind of question people ask when they're trying to include you. I opened my mouth. My mother was faster. Ivy didn't finish college, Craig. The table shifted. Forks paused. Craig blinked. Oh, that's fine. Lots of people. She had potential. My mother tilted her head, the picture of maternal sorrow. But some people just aren't built for it. I felt 30 pairs of eyes graze my skin. I left for a reason, Mom. Honey, we've been over this. Meredith pressed her lips together. Can we not do this at dinner? My mother turned to Craig, voice low enough to seem intimate, loud enough for the entire end of the table to hear. I just worry about her, you know. A mother never stops worrying. My father picked up his wine glass, drank, set it down, said nothing. Ruth looked at me from the other end of the table. Her eyes said 2 words. Not yet. After dinner, I was standing on the back porch when the screen door opened. Craig. He leaned against the railing, hands in his pockets. For what it's worth, he said, your mom seems complicated. I looked at him. You okay? He asked. It was the first time anyone in Meredith's orbit had asked me that. The first time someone new hadn't simply accepted my mother's version as gospel. I will be, I said. He nodded, went back inside. I stood in the cold for another 10 minutes, watching my breath disappear into the dark. January. A Tuesday. I was buying dish soap at the Stop and Shop on Boston Avenue when I heard my name. Ivy? Ivy Colton? I turned. Uncle Rob stood at the end of the aisle, a basket of groceries in one hand, a look on his face like he'd just seen someone back from the dead. He set the basket down and hugged me. Tight. The kind of hug that lasts 3 seconds too long because the person means it. Kiddo, I've missed you. He pulled back, both hands on my shoulders. Your mom said you didn't want to hear from any of us. I felt the floor tilt. She said what? She said you were going through something, needed space. He searched my face. Said I'd make it worse if I reached out. I stared at him. 4 years. 4 years of silence between us, and I'd assumed he just didn't care enough, that he'd heard my mother's version and written me off like everyone else. Uncle Rob, I never said that. Not once. His jaw tightened. Something shifted behind his eyes. Not surprise exactly, but confirmation. Like a suspicion he'd carried for years had just been proven right. Tell me, he said. All of it. We sat in his car in the parking lot for 40 minutes. I told him about the stroke, about leaving school, about Mom forbidding me to explain, about the barbecue, about the way she cried on cue, and the way the room always believed her. He didn't interrupt. He just listened. When I finished, he exhaled through his nose and said one sentence. She controlled the story. I nodded. He was quiet for a moment. Then, what are you doing now? For work? I hesitated, looked at my hands. I'm building something. I can't say more yet. He didn't push, didn't pry. He reached into his jacket and handed me a business card. Robert Grant, His newsletter, Financial Analysis for the FinTech Sector. I still keep up with the tech world, he said. Old habit. When you're ready, he added. I'm here. I put the card in my wallet. A thought flickered across my mind. Brief, electric. But I didn't say it out loud. I just drove home. 2 months later, my phone rang on a Sunday morning. My mother's name on the screen. Rare. She almost never called me directly. I was someone she talked about, not someone she talked to. Sweetheart, I've been thinking. The word sweetheart landed like a counterfeit bill, too smooth, too deliberate. What if you went back to school? I could help with tuition. There it was, the trap, perfectly set, neatly wrapped. If I went back, she'd get a new narrative, the selfless mother who saved her wayward daughter. If I refused, she'd get a different one, the ungrateful child who rejected help. Either way, she won. I appreciate the offer, Mom, but I'm fine where I am. Where are you, Ivy? Doing what? You can't keep hiding. I'm not hiding. A pause. When she spoke again, the sweetness was gone. You know what people say about you, right? At every gathering. They pity you, Ivy. Is that what you want? My hand tightened on the phone. What I want is for you to stop speaking for me. I speak for you because you have nothing to say. Click. I sat in my car outside Ruth's apartment. My hands were shaking. Not from sadness. I'd burned through sadness years ago. This was something different, sharper, cleaner. Then my phone buzzed. An email notification. From Linden Equity Partners, San Francisco. Subject, Juniper Labs. Formal Series A offer. I opened it, read it once, read it again. Dear Ms. Parker, we are pleased to extend a formal term sheet for a Series A investment in Juniper Labs at a pre-money valuation of $12 million. $12 million. I looked at the number. Then I looked in the rearview mirror. My eyes were dry, completely dry. I had no more tears left for that woman. I put the car in drive and went home to build. I flew to San Francisco on a Wednesday in April, a red-eye from JFK coach seat. I wore the same black blazer I'd bought at a thrift store in New Haven 4 years earlier. The Linden Equity offices were on the 32nd floor of a glass tower in Soma. The conference room had a view of the Bay Bridge. I signed the term sheet across from 3 partners who were each worth more than every house on my mother's street combined. Series A, $12 million valuation. I retained 62% ownership. Juniper Labs, the company I'd started with my grandmother's $3,200, in a spare bedroom that smelled like lavender and Bengay, was now valued at $12 million. I kept the name Ivy Parker. Every press release, every legal filing, every signature. Parker. Ruth's name. The name of the woman who believed in me when the people who were supposed to didn't. No one in the Colton family would ever connect Ivy Parker, CEO of a logistics software company, with Ivy Colton, the dropout who does some computer thing. A few weeks after closing, TechCrunch ran a small feature. Juniper Labs, the stealth logistics startup quietly eating the market. The reporter asked for a photo. I declined. The article ran with a stock image of a shipping container and a pull quote about operational efficiency. Uncle Robert's newsletter covered the logistics tech sector. He bookmarked the TechCrunch piece that week. He even mentioned it in his Friday roundup. Keep an eye on Juniper Labs. Founder Ivy Parker is doing something interesting in last-mile optimization. He wrote my name. Didn't recognize it. I read his newsletter from my apartment in Bridgeport and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not victory, not vindication. Just the quiet, stubborn satisfaction of a thing well made. I didn't hide because I was ashamed. I hid because visibility had already cost me once. And I wasn't going to let anyone take this away. Ruth called me over on a Saturday afternoon in October. 2 years before the Thanksgiving that changed everything. She was 79 by then. The stroke had aged her, but her mind was a steel trap. She still read the newspaper front to back every morning. She still beat me at Scrabble every single week. Sit down, she said when I walked in. She was in her wheelchair by the bedroom closet. A shoebox sat on her lap, the old kind, from a department store that probably didn't exist anymore. She handed it to me. Open it. Inside, beneath a few photographs and a rubber-banded stack of birthday cards, was a single printed email. I unfolded it. From Diane.colton@gmail.com. 2. Paula.reynolds@ridgelinetech.com. Date: March 14th, 2018. Subject: Regarding Ivy Colton. Confidential. I'm writing out of concern for my daughter, Ivy Colton. She has a history of unreliability, and I would hate for your company to be put in a difficult position. I love my daughter, but I believe in honesty, and I feel it's only fair to warn you. The words blurred. My hands were shaking. Grandma, how long have you had this? Since the week it happened. She used my computer and forgot to sign out. I printed it before she could delete it. Why didn't you tell me sooner? She reached over and put her hand on mine. Steady. Because you weren't ready. You would have confronted her, and she would have destroyed you. You needed to be standing on your own ground first. She looked at me. Really looked, the way she did when she wanted me to hear something with more than my ears. Are you standing now? I thought about the Series A, the 22 employees, the platform that ran supply chains for 200 businesses across 18 states. I'm standing. Then you hold on to that, and you wait for the right moment. She squeezed my hand. If she ever tries to rewrite history in front of the people who matter, you show them the ink. I took the email home. I put it in my safe. I told myself I'd never need it. I was wrong. 3 weeks before this year's Thanksgiving, I was at Meredith's apartment picking up a coat I'd lent her the previous winter. She was on the phone when I walked in. Speaker on. She didn't hear me come through the front door. My mother's voice filled the room. I've invited the Hendersons and Uncle Frank's family this year, 30 people. I want this to be the year Meredith announces her engagement to Craig. It needs to be perfect. I stopped in the hallway, my hand on the door frame. And if Ivy starts anything, my mother continued, I need you to handle it. You know how she gets. Meredith sighed. She doesn't get anything, Mom. She just sits there. Exactly. My mother's voice sharpened. And it makes me look bad. Like I raised a zombie. Meredith didn't respond to that. The silence was its own kind of agreement. I walked backward, quiet, out the front door. I didn't take the coat. In the car, I sat with the engine off. I could hear my own pulse. Not racing, steady, resigned. Then my phone buzzed. An email from a name I didn't recognize at first, an editor at Forbes. Dear Ms. Parker, we'd like to feature Juniper Labs in our 30 under 30 list for logistics technology. The piece will publish on November 27th. We'll need a professional photo and a brief interview at your earliest convenience. November 27th, Thanksgiving Day. I read it 3 times. I didn't plan this. I hadn't whispered into the universe or made some secret arrangement. Forbes had their schedule. I had mine. And the two had just collided on the one day of the year my mother reserved for reminding 30 people that I was nobody. I looked out the windshield at the bare November trees. I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I emailed back. I'd be happy to participate. November 27th. The same table, the same people, the same mother with the same story. But this time, the story had a different ending, and she didn't write it. Thanksgiving morning. I stood in front of my bathroom mirror at 7:15. Gray sweater, jeans, boots, no jewelry except the small pearl studs Ruth gave me for my 21st birthday. I looked exactly the way I'd looked at every family gathering for 7 years. Unremarkable. On purpose. I picked up Ruth at 8. She was already dressed and waiting in her wheelchair by the front door, a tin of homemade shortbread on her lap. You look nice, she said. I look the same as always. Exactly. We drove an hour to my parents' house in Glastonbury, the Colonial on Maple Ridge Drive, white clapboard, black shutters, a porch my father painted every other spring. Cars already lined the street, at least a dozen. I helped Ruth out of the car, unfolded her wheelchair, and pushed her up the driveway. The front door was open. Warm air and the smell of roasting turkey spilled out. Inside, the house hummed. Voices, laughter, a Motown playlist my mother put on every year to prove she was fun. I wheeled Ruth through the threshold. The living room was full. Aunt Linda by the fireplace with her husband Tom, Uncle Frank and his wife near the bay window, Tommy, my cousin, helping his toddler out of a snowsuit, Mrs. Henderson, Craig's grandmother, perched on the settee with perfect posture, clutching a glass of sparkling water. And at the center of it all, my mother. Burgundy dress, pearls, hair freshly done, holding court near the kitchen archway like she was hosting the Emmys. She saw me, smiled. It didn't reach her eyes. It never did. "Oh, Ivy. You brought Mother, how nice." She turned back to Aunt Linda without missing a beat. Ivy still lives near Mother. It gives her something to do. My father appeared from the kitchen, wine glass in hand. He squeezed my shoulder. "Hey, kiddo." Then he was gone, back to wherever he went to avoid everything. Uncle Rob stood in the far corner talking to Frank. He looked up and caught my eye. A small nod, a warm one. I pushed Ruth to her place at the table. She reached up and held my hand. "You okay, baby?" "I'm okay, Grandma." I didn't know it yet, but in less than 2 hours that room would look at me differently. All of them. At the same time. Dinner was called at 4 o'clock sharp. 31 people settled into chairs around a long table, assembled from 3 smaller ones, the seams hidden under a cream linen tablecloth my mother ironed that morning. I know because she told 4 people. My mother stood. She lifted her glass. The room quieted. "I want to thank everyone for being here. This year is special." She beamed at Meredith. "Meredith and Craig are engaged." Applause. Craig smiled modestly. Meredith held up her left hand, a princess-cut diamond that caught the chandelier light. "Meredith, you've made us so proud," my mother continued. "Junior partner at 31, and now a beautiful engagement. Everything a mother dreams of." She paused. Let it land. Then her gaze drifted down the table, slowly, deliberately, until it found me. "And Ivy." She tilted her head. That look, pity sculpted to perfection. "We're just grateful you're here. We keep hoping next year will be your year." A few sympathetic smiles. Uncle Frank looked at his plate. Tommy's wife glanced at me, then away. Mrs. Henderson, Craig's grandmother, leaned toward me from 2 seats down. "What do you do, Ivy?" Before I could draw breath, my mother answered. "Ivy is figuring things out. She left college a few years ago." She lowered her voice just enough to seem discreet, just loud enough for half the table to hear. "It's been a journey." She pressed on journey, like it was a wound she was dressing in public. Meredith added, without looking up from her plate, "She's really good with computers, though. She fixed my printer once." Laughter. Not cruel. Polite, reflexive. The kind of laughter that comes when people don't know what else to do. I set my fork down. Didn't speak. From the far end of the table, Ruth's voice cut through clean and steady. "Ivy is more than what you've been told." The laughter stopped. My mother's smile tightened. "Mother, please, let's just enjoy dinner." Ruth looked at my mother, said nothing more, but her eyes held something. A clock ticking down. A warning no one in that room understood. Except me. Under the table, I felt my phone vibrate in my pocket. I didn't reach for it. But somewhere in that room, at least 3 other phones had just buzzed too. After dinner, the table scattered into the living room. Coffee, pie, the easy noise of people settling into the second act of a long afternoon. I was standing near the bookshelf, holding a cup of tea I hadn't sipped, when I heard my mother's voice. She was on the sofa. Mrs. Henderson sat beside her. My mother leaned in, close enough to seem confidential, far enough that her voice carried to anyone within 10 feet. "Between you and me, Margaret, I sometimes wonder if Ivy dropped out because of mental health issues." My fingers tightened around the cup. "We've tried to help. She refuses." My mother pressed a hand to her chest. "I don't say this to be cruel. I say it because a mother carries that weight alone." Mrs. Henderson's expression was unreadable. Aunt Linda, standing behind the sofa, heard every word. So did Tommy. So did Craig, who was refilling his coffee at the sideboard 3 steps away. I set the tea down on the shelf. I walked over. My shoes were quiet on the carpet, but every person near that sofa tracked my movement. "Mom, I need you to stop." She looked up, startled or performing startled. "Ivy, I was just—" "You were telling a stranger I have mental health issues, in front of our family." I kept my voice even, level. "That's not concern. That's cruelty." Her eyes glistened on command. I just worry about you. My father's voice came from the corner, half a question. Diane, maybe. Kevin, don't. She didn't even turn. Then she looked back at me, and the mask slipped. Just a crack, just for a second. Underneath was something cold and certain. If you had done something with your life, I wouldn't have to explain you to people. 30 people. That sentence landed on all of them. Tommy looked at his wife. Aunt Linda covered her mouth. Craig set down the coffee pot and stared at the floor. From the end of the room, in her wheelchair, Ruth spoke. 2 words, clear as a bell. That's enough. And then Uncle Rob's phone buzzed, and everything changed. Rob pulled the phone from his shirt pocket. Reflex, the way you check a notification without thinking. He glanced at the screen, then he stopped. His thumb hovered, his mouth opened slightly. He read it again. I watched from across the room. I didn't know what the alert said, but I knew from the way his face changed, the way the color drained from his cheeks and then came flooding back, that it was happening. Ivy? His voice was quiet, almost a whisper, but the room was already silent from my mother's last sentence, and in that silence, his single word carried like a gunshot. I looked at him, he looked at me, then he looked at Ruth, then back at his phone. Is this you? Uncle Frank was the first to move. What is it, Rob? Rob turned the phone around. Frank took it, read. His eyebrows climbed his forehead. Good Lord, Frank said. Aunt Linda was already pulling out her own phone. Her thumbs moved fast. I could see the glow of a search engine reflecting off her glasses. 3 seconds. 5. Oh my God! She turned her screen toward the table. A photo. The one I'd taken 2 weeks ago in a studio in New Haven, the only professional portrait I'd ever sat for because Forbes had required it. My face, my name, a headline about an acquisition worth $47 million. One by one, heads turned. Tommy, his wife, Uncle Frank's daughter, Craig, Mrs. Henderson. They looked at the phones. Then they looked at me. My mother stood in the center of the room. She hadn't moved. She looked from face to face, trying to read the room the way she always did, trying to find the current so she could steer it. What? She said. What is everyone looking at? No one answered her. Meredith reached for Craig's phone. He handed it to her without a word. She read. Her hand dropped to her lap. She set the phone face down on the cushion beside her and stared at the carpet. My mother was the last person in the room to find out, and for the first time in 7 years, she had nothing to say. I need to stop here for just a second. The room is silent. 30 people are staring at Ivy. Diane still doesn't know what's happening. What do you think happens next? Does Ivy stay calm, or does she finally let it all out? Type C for calm, D for eruption. And if this story has you on the edge of your seat, hit subscribe now. Let's keep going. My father walked over to my mother. He held out his phone, screen up. She took it, read. I watched her face move through 3 stages. Confusion, her brow furrowed, her lips parted. Shock, her chin pulled back, her grip on the phone tightened. And then something I had never seen on my mother's face in 29 years of being her daughter. Fear. This isn't real, she said. Uncle Rob stood up from his chair. It's on Forbes, Diane, and TechCrunch, and Bloomberg's Afternoon Wire. It's very real. My mother looked at me. Her mouth opened and closed once before sound came out. You built a company? Worth $47 million? Yes. And you didn't tell us? The question landed in the room like she'd thrown a glass against the wall. Because even now, even standing in the wreckage of her own narrative, she made it about her, about what she hadn't been told, about what she'd been denied. I kept my voice steady. You never asked what I was building. You only ever told people what I wasn't. The silence that followed was so complete, I could hear the ice shifting in someone's glass on the far end of the table. Aunt Linda pressed her hand to her chest. Uncle Frank looked at my mother, then at me, then down at his shoes. Mrs. Henderson turned to my mother. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. You told me she had mental health issues 10 minutes ago. My mother's face went white. I didn't mean it like... I think you meant it exactly like that. Craig stood near the mantel. He looked at Meredith. Meredith didn't look back. Cousin Tommy leaned forward in his chair, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. His wife had her hand over her mouth. The realization was spreading through the room like a slow wave. Not just that I'd succeeded, but that my mother had lied. Systematically. For 7 years. To every single person in this house. And they had all believed her. My mother tried to recover. She straightened her shoulders, tilted her chin, the posture she always used when the narrative needed correcting. She could have told us. She chose to shut us out. No, Diane. Ruth's voice came from the wheelchair at the end of the room. Not loud, not angry, just absolute. You shut her out. The room turned, every face like a compass finding north. Ruth sat perfectly still, her left hand rested on the arm of the wheelchair, the hand that hadn't worked right in 7 years, since the stroke that started all of this. Ivy left school to take care of me. I had a stroke. You know that. She looked at Diane with eyes that had been waiting a long time for this moment. Everyone in this room should have known that 7 years ago. But you told them she quit because she was lazy. You told them she was a disgrace. Mother, because you were ashamed, not of her. Ruth's voice didn't waver. Of yourself. You refused to help me, your own mother. Ivy was 22 years old. She drove 4 hours in the middle of the night, alone, and when she tried to tell people the truth, you cried in front of them and made her the villain. Nobody breathed. Aunt Linda looked at my mother. Diane, is that true? Diane didn't answer. Her lips moved, but nothing came out. And then, from the corner of the room, from the man who had spent 7 years as furniture, my father spoke. It's true. I turned. He was standing by the window, wine glass gone, hands at his sides. He looked older than I'd ever seen him. All of it, he said. That was all. 2 sentences. But from a man who had not defended me in 7 years, they hit the room like a detonation. I looked at my father. My eyes burned. But I didn't cry. I'd spent too many years learning not to. He looked back at me, and for the first time, he didn't look away. My mother's hands were shaking, but she was still standing, still trying. Okay, fine. She pressed her palms together like she was centering herself, the performance of a woman being reasonable. I should have been more supportive, but I never hurt her. I never did anything to stop. You called my internship. 4 words. The room went still again. My mother froze. Not dramatic, clinical. The way a person freezes when they hear a sound in the house at 3 a.m. In 2018, I said, a software company in Hartford, Ridgeline Tech. They offered me a position. 1 week before I started, you called HR and told them I was unreliable. That's ridiculous. Her voice climbed half an octave. I opened my phone. The photo I'd taken of the printed email, the one Ruth had pulled from a shoebox 2 years ago. I'd kept it in my safe. I'd saved a copy on my phone. I never wanted to use it. I handed it to Rob. He adjusted his glasses. He read it aloud. I'm writing out of concern for my daughter, Ivy Colton. She has a history of unreliability, and I would hate for your company to be put in a difficult position. I love my daughter, but I believe in honesty. He trailed off. He didn't need to finish. The room had already heard enough. He set the phone on the coffee table, looked at my mother. You sabotaged your own daughter. I was trying to protect her. From what? His voice was quiet, devastatingly quiet. From succeeding? Uncle Frank leaned back in his chair. Jesus, Diane. Meredith was still on the sofa. Her face was pale. Mom, did you really do that? My mother didn't answer. She looked around the room, the slow, searching look of a person who has always been able to find at least one ally and is discovering for the first time that there are none. 30 faces. Not one looked back with sympathy. Craig stood a step behind Meredith. I noticed something small. His hand, which had been resting on her shoulder, was gone. He'd moved it to his side, a tiny gesture. But in that room, at that moment, it said everything. My mother sat down. Not gracefully. Not the way she normally lowered herself into a chair, smoothing her dress, crossing her ankles. She just dropped. The cushion sighed under her weight, and she cried. Real tears this time. I could tell the difference. I'd been watching her manufactured grief for 7 years, and this wasn't that. This was ugly. Unpracticed. The sound of someone whose stage had collapsed beneath them. Everything I did was for this family, she said. So people wouldn't look down on us. Ruth's voice came from across the room, steady as a hymn. People aren't looking down on us because of Ivy, Diane. They're looking down on us because of you. Right now, in this room. My mother looked at my father. He was staring at the floor. He didn't move. She looked at Meredith. Meredith was looking at her own hands in her lap. Then she looked at me. I looked back. I'd imagined this moment before. In the dark, in my studio apartment, on the worst nights. I'd imagined her face when she found out. I thought I'd feel triumphant, or vindicated, or at least relieved. I didn't feel any of those things. I felt tired. I didn't plan this, Mom. My voice was calm, not cold, just finished. I didn't come here to humiliate you. The article published today because that's when Forbes scheduled it. I can't control timing. I paused. But I also won't control the truth anymore. Not for you. She didn't respond. She just sat there, small in a way I'd never seen her be. The woman who had filled every room she'd ever entered, who had managed every conversation, directed every narrative, decided who was the hero and who was the failure, looked like someone who'd forgotten her own name. I stood up. I think I'm going to step outside for a minute. I walked to Ruth, unlocked the wheels of her chair, pushed her through the living room, past 30 silent people, through the front door and onto the porch. The November air hit my face. Cold, sharp, clean. I thought that was the end. It wasn't, because the next morning my phone rang. And it was Meredith. Black Friday morning. I sat in a hotel room in Glastonbury, a Holiday Inn Express off the interstate. I hadn't stayed at my parents' house in 3 years. Ruth was with me, still asleep in the second bed, the blankets pulled up to her chin. My phone rang at 8:47. Meredith. I let it ring twice. Then I answered. Her voice was different, stripped, no polish, no performance. She sounded like someone who'd been awake all night. I need to tell you something. I waited. I knew about the internship call. The hotel room was very quiet. I could hear the ice machine humming down the hall. Mom told me she handled it. She said you weren't ready for a real job. And a breath, shaky. I didn't question it. You knew for 5 years, I said. I knew, and I said nothing. Her voice cracked. Because if I questioned her, I'd become you, and I was terrified of that. I closed my eyes. So you let me be the sacrifice? Yes. The word came out raw. No excuse attached. No but. And I'm not calling to ask you to forgive me, she continued. I'm calling because you deserve to know that I know what I did, and I'm sorry. The silence between us was long. It held 7 years of Sunday dinners and unreturned texts and a printer joke that 30 people laughed at. I don't know what to do with your apology right now, Meredith, but I hear it. That's more than I deserve. A pause. Then she said something unexpected. Craig told me something last night, after we got home. What? He said, your family needs help, Meredith. Professional help. He said he won't move forward with the wedding until I address this. I thought about Craig on the back porch 2 years ago. Your mom seems complicated. The man had been paying attention all along. I think he's right, Meredith said quietly. So do I. Neither of us said goodbye. She hung up first. I sat on the edge of the bed and watched the gray morning light push through the curtain. That afternoon, I drove back to my parents' house. Not for reconciliation, not for round 2. I was picking up Ruth's overnight bag and the tin of shortbread we'd left on the kitchen counter. The house was quiet. The decorations from yesterday's dinner were still up. Candles burned to nubs, the tablecloth still creased where 31 place settings had been. It smelled like cold gravy and regret. My mother sat at the kitchen table, eyes swollen. No makeup. She was wearing a sweatshirt I hadn't seen in years, an old Yukon one, faded, the kind of thing she'd never let anyone see her in. My father sat next to her, coffee mug in front of him, untouched. Ivy, can we talk? My mother said. I stood in the doorway. I'm listening. I made mistakes. I know that. She pressed her hands flat on the table, steadying herself. But you have to understand, I grew up with nothing. People looked down on our family. I just wanted us to look right. And I wasn't right enough. I didn't mean, Mom. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I'm not going to fight you, but I need to be clear about something. She waited. I'm not coming back to this table. Not at Thanksgiving, not at Christmas, not at any gathering. Until you do 3 things. What 3 things? 1. You tell every person who was at that table the real reason I left school, not your version. The truth. In your own words, in your own time, but before New Year's. She flinched. 2. You delete the family group chat and let people reach out to me directly. No more gatekeeping. Her jaw tightened. 3. You start seeing a therapist. Not for me, for you. She looked at me for a long time. And if I don't? Then this is the last real conversation we have, and that will be your choice, not mine. She didn't respond. I turned to my father. He was gripping the coffee mug now, both hands. Dad, I wrote you a letter 4 years ago. You never answered. I need to know why. He looked at the table, then at me. I didn't know what to say. That would have been enough. I picked up Ruth's bag, the shortbread tin. I walked to the front door. Ruth was waiting in the car. When I got in, she looked at my face and squeezed my hand. You did good, baby. Now drive. I drove. The highway was quiet. Black Friday traffic had cleared by late afternoon. Everyone already where they needed to be, shopping bags full, ovens cooling, just me, Ruth, and 60 miles of Connecticut pavement. Snow had started to fall, light, the kind that doesn't stick but makes the air look silver. The radio was on, some news anchor running through Black Friday retail numbers, normal things, easy things. Ruth reached over and turned the volume down. You never told them what I said to you in the hospital. I glanced at her. No, that's between us. Can I say it again? I nodded. She straightened in her seat, as much as the wheelchair-bound muscles would allow. She looked at the road ahead through the windshield, not at me, the way people do when they're saying something they want to get exactly right. I said, they will try to make you small. Don't let them, but don't become them either. I kept driving. My eyes burned. The road blurred for a second, then cleared. I spent 7 years trying to honor both halves of that sentence. Be big, but don't be cruel. Build, but don't bulldoze. Win, but don't gloat. Stand tall, but don't stand on anyone. I think I did okay. You did more than okay, baby. Ruth settled back into her seat. She pulled the blanket higher over her lap. You did it clean. I laughed. A real one. The first one in this story. Maybe the first real laugh in years. It came from somewhere deep and unexpected, like finding a window open in a room you thought was sealed. Ruth smiled. She closed her eyes. I drove us home through the silver air, and for the first time since March 2017, since a phone call at 2 in the morning, since a 4-hour drive in the dark, since the first lie my mother told on my behalf, the quiet didn't feel like erasure. It felt like peace. 2 weeks after Thanksgiving, the fallout was measurable. Uncle Rob wrote a piece on his personal blog. No names, no locations, just an essay titled, When Families Silence the Wrong Person. It was about the way certain households appoint a scapegoat and a golden child, and how the people on the outside never question which is which. The piece was shared over 6,000 times. 3 readers emailed him to say they'd cried. He told me this over coffee in Bridgeport, shaking his head like he still couldn't believe what he'd witnessed at that table. Aunt Linda called me directly. First time in 4 years. She said she was taking over Christmas this year. Your mother won't be hosting. We think it's best if someone else handles it. She didn't say it with cruelty. She said it with the quiet finality of someone who'd made a decision and wasn't interested in debate. 3 relatives reached out in the first week. Uncle Frank left a voicemail, brief, gruff, the way men of his generation apologize. I should have asked more questions, I didn't, I'm sorry. Tommy called. He cried on the phone. I believed her, Ivy. For 7 years, I'm so sorry, I just should have. I told him what I told all of them. You believed what you were told. I don't blame you for that. And Diane? She sent me an email, not a phone call. She didn't have the nerve. The email was short, 4 sentences. I understand your conditions. I'm not ready for all of them, but I've called Dr. Shelton and made an appointment for next Tuesday. That's what I can do right now. I read it twice. I didn't respond that night, but I saved it. Later I learned what pushed her. It wasn't my words. It wasn't Rob's blog post. It was Margaret Henderson. Craig's grandmother had pulled Diane aside before leaving Thanksgiving night and said, "I raised 3 children. I never once called a stranger to sabotage one of them. You need help, Diane. Real help." A mother's judgment, from a peer, from a woman her own age. That was the blade that finally got through. Craig held firm. He told Meredith he loved her, but the wedding was on pause until she started family therapy, not as a punishment, as a prerequisite. "I'm not marrying into something I don't understand," he said. Meredith agreed. She started sessions the second week of December. Then, a week before Christmas, a letter arrived at my apartment. Not a text, not an email. A letter, handwritten, on cream stationery, the kind Meredith used for thank you notes. The envelope had a real stamp. She'd walked it to a mailbox. It was 4 pages long. She wrote about growing up as the good one, about the pressure to perform. Perfect grades, perfect manners, perfect resume. She wrote about the fear that lived under all of it, the fear that if she ever faltered, she'd be thrown into the role I occupied. "I performed for her my whole life," she wrote, "and I still don't know who I am without her applause." She wrote about the internship call, about the years she stayed quiet, about every Thanksgiving she watched me sit alone at the end of the table and said nothing, because saying something meant risking everything she'd built on my silence. "I used you as a shield, Ivy. I let Mom put you down so she wouldn't put me down. And I told myself it wasn't my fault because I wasn't the one saying the words." She ended with this: "I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm asking you to know that I finally see what I did, and that I'm not okay with who I've been." There was a postscript. It said, "I didn't choose law because I loved it. I chose it because Mom said it was the only thing worth being." I read the letter 3 times. Then I sent one text back. "I read your letter. I need time, but I'm not closing the door." Her reply came in seconds. "That's enough. My sister and I are not close. Not yet. Maybe not ever the way sisters should be. But for the first time, we're honest, and honest is where healing starts." The Apex acquisition closed in January. $47 million. I signed the final documents in a conference room in San Francisco with a view of the Bay Bridge, the same view I'd seen 2 years earlier when I closed the Series A. Same blazer even. The thrift store one. It still fit. As part of the deal, I stayed on as VP of Product for a 2-year earn-out period. It meant relocating to Boston, Apex's East Coast hub. I found a 2-bedroom in Brookline. Nothing flashy. A quiet street, good light. Ruth moved with me. I hired a full-time home aide, someone who could be there when I was at the office. Ruth's room had a bay window overlooking a small garden. She watched the birds every morning while drinking the same Earl Grey she'd been drinking for 40 years. "This is nicer than the house I raised your mother in," she said one afternoon, not looking up from her crossword. Ironic. I started therapy. My own, not family. Not because I was falling apart, but because 7 years of silence leaves marks you can't see. The kind that show up at 3 in the morning when the apartment is quiet, and your brain decides to replay every dinner table, every unanswered letter, every phone call where the person on the other end chose convenience over love. Uncle Rob drove up from Connecticut once a month. He'd bring his newsletter printouts and terrible jokes, and we'd eat takeout on my living room floor like I was 12 again, and he was the fun uncle who always snuck me extra dessert. He was the closest thing to a father I'd had. I told him that once. He went quiet for a long time. Then he said, "That means more than you know, kiddo." The Forbes 30 Under 30 piece came out the week after Thanksgiving. There was a photo. Me, in the Juniper Labs office, arms at my sides, looking directly at the camera. The caption read, "Ivy Parker built a $47 million company in silence, because silence was the only language her family gave her." People ask me if I've forgiven my parents. The honest answer is complicated. People love to ask, "Have you forgiven them?" Like forgiveness is a light switch. On or off, yes or no. It's not. Some days I wake up and I feel nothing but clarity. I see my mother as a woman who grew up poor, who was mocked by her own relatives, who built her entire identity around how her family looked from the outside. And when I didn't fit the picture, she didn't know how to love me without erasing me. I see her. I understand her. Other days I'm in the grocery store and I see a mother with her daughter, and the mother says, "I'm so proud of you," and I have to leave the aisle. That's the truth. Both halves. Same person. My mother completed 4 therapy sessions by Christmas. She called 3 relatives to correct the record: Aunt Linda, Uncle Frank, and Tommy. I know because Linda told me. She said Diane cried on every call, and not the manufactured kind. The real kind. The kind that doesn't have an audience in mind. She hasn't called the rest yet. But she started. My father wrote me a letter. 1 page. No preamble, no justification. Just, I should have answered. I should have answered every time. I don't have a reason that's good enough. I only have the truth, which is that I was afraid of your mother, and I chose her silence over yours. That's my failure. I read it at my kitchen table. Ruth was asleep in her room. The apartment was quiet. I didn't write back yet. But I kept the letter. Here's what I've learned. Love without boundaries is just a door without a lock. Anyone can walk in, anyone can take whatever they want, and they'll call it family while they do it. I don't hate my mother. I hate what she did. And I'm learning, slowly, imperfectly, to separate the two. But I won't sit at a table where my name is only spoken with pity. Not anymore. My boundaries aren't punishment. They're architecture. I'm building the shape of a relationship I can actually survive. If you're listening to this and something feels familiar, a parent who rewrites your story, a sibling who gets the spotlight, a family that made you the cautionary tale, I want you to know something. You don't have to build a $47 million company to prove your worth. I didn't build Juniper to prove anything to my mother. I built it because my grandmother handed me $3,200 and said, "I didn't raise you to be small." I built it because silence was the only space they left me, and I decided to fill it with something real instead of something bitter. Your worth isn't the company you build. It's not the degree you earn or the title on your business card or the number in your bank account. Your worth is the fact that you kept going when no one clapped, when no one asked, when no one believed. Maybe you're the daughter who calls and never gets called back. Maybe you're the son who shows up to every holiday and gets introduced as the one who didn't. Maybe you're the sibling who got the hand-me-downs while someone else got the applause. I see you. And if you need permission to set a boundary with someone who loves you badly, here it is. You can love someone and still refuse to let them define you. You can honor where you came from without letting it decide where you're going. You can walk away from a table where your name is only spoken with pity. You can build something in silence. And one day, maybe not today, maybe not this year, but one day, the silence speaks for itself, not as revenge, not as proof, just as the quiet, undeniable sound of a life well lived. That's the only vindication that lasts. It's February now. Grandma Ruth turned 81 last week. I threw her a party. Nothing extravagant. 12 people, my apartment in Brookline, a chocolate cake from the bakery around the corner, and a playlist of Motown songs she actually likes, unlike the one my mother used to play for show. Uncle Rob was there. He wore a ridiculous party hat and didn't take it off for 3 hours. Tommy drove up from Connecticut with his wife and their toddler, who spent the evening trying to steal frosting off the cake with his bare hands. And Meredith came. She came alone. No Craig, no ring, not yet. She didn't stay long, but she walked in with a bouquet of gardenias, Ruth's favorite flower, the kind of detail you only know if you've been paying attention for longer than you've let on. She set them on the table and said, "Happy birthday, Grandma." Ruth looked up from her wheelchair and smiled. "Took you long enough." Meredith laughed. It was small and a little broken, but it was real. My mother wasn't there. Not because I didn't invite her. I did. She said she wasn't ready, and for the first time, I believed her. Because not ready is honest, and honest is where we start. Ruth sat at the head of the table. She looked around the room, at the faces, the flowers, the ridiculous party hat on Rob's head, the toddler with frosting on his chin. She looked at me. She smiled. "This is a good table," she said. She's right. It is a good table. I built it. Not with money, not with revenge, with patience, with silence, and with the people who showed up when no one was watching. My name is Ivy Colton. Some people know me as Ivy Parker. I'm 29, and I'm done being someone else's cautionary tale. This is my story, and I'm the one telling it now. Thank you for staying with me through this entire story. If Ivy's journey meant something to you, if you've ever been the one sitting quietly at a table where your name was only spoken with pity, I'd love to hear your story. Drop it in the comments. And if you want more stories like this, check the description. There's one I think you'll connect with just as deeply. I'll see you there.